to have everyone with us today, wherever you are in the country. Hopefully you're going okay with the lockdown scenarios or whatever's happening with you. We might kick off because we've got lots of content to cover today. So thanks for joining us for this webinar hosted by Advisr and Blake Oliver, where we're talking about attracting and retaining great talent in the insurance marketplace. It's a competitive world out there. We know that we need great talent to grow our businesses. We can't do it all on our own, and yet that's not always easy, is it? It's difficult to do. So we're joined today by Julia Cook from Blake Oliver, and she'll be guiding us through and sharing her expertise gained from years and years and years within the recruitment industry, and in particular focusing on insurance. So welcome, Julia, to today. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Julia, just wondering if you'd be able to give us a bit of a brief introduction to yourself and your experience. So, if you could just outline some of that, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So, I've been with Blake Oliver for coming up 4 years now. I've had 10 years experience all up, solely recruiting for the insurance industry, and that spans across broking, underwriting, claims, management, right down to your grads that are coming in through insurance programs.
Yep, excellent. That sounds good. So you've been there a while and lots of good experience. In this new season, this lockdown season, I just thought as we start, I thought I'd ask and see if you had any lockdown tip or hack, something that you've used or turned to help make it through these days. Have you got any tips or hacks to share with us that you've found useful for you?
Yeah, there's been a few, I guess. Getting out of bed and starting at the same time every day has certainly helped, and just making sure you're getting through the work every day. I'm homeschooling as well, so that's been an extra challenge. But I think if you sort of keep that routine, sort of helped me to stay on top of my game, or as on top as we can be, certainly in the lockdown capital of Australia down here in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm Sydney based, so we're joining you. We understand. I don't think we understand entirely because you guys have had it for a long time, but we can relate what's going on. That's a good tip, I think, the routine. Not always easy to do, but helpful. As we go through our time together today, I thought that we'd cover off a couple of different sections. One, thinking about the sort of hiring manager or the business owner and some of the challenges that they might be facing or thinking about. And so we've got some areas where we'll delve into that, which might help to just equip and empower people in that scenario to think about how do they really find and attract talent in this tight market that we find ourselves in. So that's an area where we'll spend some time. And then we also want to focus on the other side as well, thinking about candidates and looking at candidates and understand what's going on in the candidate's mind. How are they thinking and viewing their careers, and how are they thinking about this space as well as they're looking for which opportunities they pursue. So there's sort of the two areas that we'll delve into today. It'd be great to have you along and sharing your experience as you come through. For those that have joined us, it's great to have you. We're with Julia Cook from Blake Oliver, and I'm Andy Jamison, CEO and founder of Advisr. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to leave them in the chat section. You can do that. We've got some of the team here that can help answer any of those for you as we go through today. But for businesses looking to recruit, Julia, the market's tight. That's what we hear. So with this tight market that's going on, what kind of questions or things are businesses that are engaging your services saying about the market? How are they feeling about the market at the moment in regards to recruiting great talent?
Quite often by the time they approach us, they've already gone through their recruitment process. They've gone through their networks, they've asked their staff about their networks, and if they know anyone who's looking, they might have advertised on some job boards, and they're at the point where, the notice period of the person who perhaps has moved on, that's all been worked through, and now they've been without staff member for 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 months sometimes, and they're really at that point where they're getting desperate and everyone's getting a bit overworked. So I guess that's what we're noticing, and they're asking us, do you have anyone in this space? And it's quite often people who are in that niche space, financial lines, for example, especially that they're looking for. So they really need somebody who's got that niche experience, and quite often, because we've got a hardening market now, they really need experienced talent so that they can have those hard conversations with their clients and also with the underwriters.
Yeah, okay. So you're seeing people that have probably started down that journey. They've often tried to do it themselves. They might have, posted a job ad, done some of those, asked the network. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, I know all those steps, and I imagine other people have gone through that journey too. And they're at that point where it's where they need a bit more help because they're under pressure in the business and they're feeling that weight of maybe the person's left and they've got that capacity issue that they need to resolve if they want to grow. So taking that a bit further, are there any sort of new themes or emerging trends that you're seeing of late in regards to the lockdown and that market? Feels like it's getting a bit tighter, but are there any sort of newer trends that might be more specific to the current scenario we find ourselves in?
Absolutely. Insurance, as you probably all know, has always been a candidate short market. There's a couple of reasons for that. We noticed a lot of people retiring and not a lot of new talent coming into the market getting trained up. We're also noticing that there's a lot more jobs in the market now. During COVID, there was a bit of shrinkage in terms of the volume of jobs that we were getting. But after lockdown, now that it's sort of become the norm and people have to onboard these new staff members, we've found a really big influx of jobs in the market. So if you're a candidate, it's a great time to look because there are so many jobs out there. But if you're a business owner, you've got a lot of competition. So you've really got to think about your branding, what you're offering to the candidates. Really drill down if you find someone that you really like and you meet them. Really drill down into what drives them and see if you can provide that fit for them to get them across the line.
Yeah, okay. So it feels like that dynamic might have shifted a little bit into the candidate's favour. It's always been in demand, good talent, but even more so now. That's sort of even more hard to find and acquire and bring into businesses, and so businesses need to be thinking about that. What about in regards to some of the changes that we're seeing with people working from home, and now that's opening up people's eyes to think about where do they live and where do they work from? And maybe there's tree change or sea change capability. And we have some regional and rural sort of brokerages that we work with at Advisr. And there's loads of great places around the country now where people are starting to think, could I do my job from there? What trends are you seeing in regards to that sort of impacting the market?
Yeah, Andy, there's been a massive shift. So we're finding that every single candidate that we're meeting with online, one of the first couple of questions is, are they out of COVID, are there going to be capabilities for me to work from home? What is that going to look like? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Can I work from home permanently? We have seen quite a few candidates move down the coast, for example, and when we open up, they don't want to go back in. So we're also noticing that some of the brokers, the regional brokers, are considering people that work all around the country. It doesn't have to, if you're a Melbourne-based broker and you're in Geelong, for example, you no longer have to live half an hour away from Geelong. You can live in Cairns. As long as you can log on and do this, then you're home and host. Just stay on top of your renewals and so I guess even then with metro or city-based brokerages or the regional ones that are in the spaces, candidates could work for either and potentially live anywhere these days. Yeah,
with some of that transition.
Yeah, absolutely right. And there seems to be a lot more flexibility around when you log on. People are trying to homeschool at the moment, so we've noticed some candidates are working later hours or earlier in the morning just to fit in what needs to be done. And then during the day, their work hours are quite sporadic because of whatever else is going on.
Yeah, I think we can all understand the rest of life. It's all blended a bit more than it has in the past, right? So I guess candidates are starting to look for that, and employers are probably starting to have to think about that. Their 9 to 5 day might look a little bit different in regards to when people are available or able to connect or get the work done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's literally one of the first or second questions that the candidates are asking, and if that's not provided, 9 times out of 10, the candidates are simply not interested if they have to go into the office every day.
Really?
It's a big one.
Okay.
It's a big one.
9 times out of 10, they're not interested if they're not seeing that flexibility.
Correct. Yep.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's really that's important for people to know about then, right? To at least be verbalizing, talking a candidate through that, making sure they're understanding their expectations, and have really good processes in place that actually mean it's real when the candidate sort of lands.
Yeah, correct. We've seen a lot of our clients just ship the laptop and the phone out by courier, and then log on, and that's their buddy. They're online, and that's your induction.
Yeah, wow.
Completely different.
It's a different world, isn't it? We've moved a long way in the last 2 years, that's for sure. So in regards to candidates choosing, one company over another, you've mentioned a few things there. Well, what other things might be causing a candidate to preference one opportunity over another in that tight market where we find ourselves, where talent's short and people have choice? Are there any other things, any other tips that you could help people to think through in regards to what they might need to be aware of?
Yeah, what we're seeing with some of our clients is they offer things like RDOs, rostered day off every month. Mat leave is another big one that people are taking into consideration. Yeah, the flexibility, as we mentioned, working from home, things like equity, their ability to buy in. It's not so much about the salary anymore and about the bonus structure and what's in it for me. People are getting a lot more excited about what can you offer me in terms of career progression, and other little perks and bits and bobs that differentiate that business from another business.
Yeah, okay. So whilst I imagine salary and bonus, that's important. That's almost a ticket to play these days. You've got to be competitive in that regards and be a good organisation, but then you need to be playing in these other spaces to give people some more options around flexibility and what that could be for them.
Yeah, correct.
So with that then, and candidates looking at where they want to go and who they want to join, and we hear that phrase, the employer of choice, as a phrase. How can businesses position themselves as an employer of choice in your mind?
I think branding is a big one. We work on a lot of our clients' branding hand in hand with them. So how we write the advertisements, for example, on LinkedIn, we sometimes use their letterhead on the LinkedIn advertisement or whatever else we're advertising on, Advisr as well, Seek. And also just word of mouth. You've really got to make sure that the people who have worked for you, you haven't burned any bridges with them, making sure there's not a huge turnover of staff. It's sort of like if you go to a bad restaurant, if you go to a bad restaurant, you start mouthing off and you tell 10 people, but if you have a great experience, you don't. So you really got to get your branding right, and the perks and what have you.
Yeah, okay. So they need to make sure that they've got their branding right, that they've got strong sort of online presence. I imagine candidates these days are pretty savvy and are looking to understand what goes on in that business and to get as much information as they can. So they'll be looking at their online profiles and presence for that, to see that.
Places like sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say places like Glassdoor. A lot of candidates go onto there and see what it's all about, what people have said who have actually worked there.
Okay. Yeah. What's a summary of Glassdoor for those that might be new to? Can you just give us 20 seconds on what Glassdoor is?
Yeah, sure. So Glassdoor is almost like a Yelp, if you will, for people who have been employed by a certain brand or a certain company. So if you go on there, you can look up CBA, for example, if you're looking at a banking job, and they'll have 2 stars out of 5 or 3 stars out of 5, and they'll give them a ranking and then say why they've ranked them that way.
Okay, right. Yeah. So for potential employees, that's a place they'll go to look at their company they might join. So that's another sort of online place, particularly for that talent acquisition. Mm-hmm. Smart talent smart people will be doing that, right, and taking those extra steps.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think your website has to be quite easy to use as well, because it's one of the first things these candidates are told to do when they're about to go to an interview is get as much research about this business as you possibly can done.
Yeah. And
give me some bullet points. So the first thing they're going to do is look at your website. Is it easy to use? Who else works there? Because the industry is very small, as you know. And what are your product lines? What do you specialize in? What kind of clients am I going to be working with there?
Yeah. What about in regards to cultural things, or how businesses can share what it's like to be a team member there, and they're sharing more cultural things potentially on social or in other ways? What are you seeing there, and what are candidates sort of feeding back to you about, the employer of choice that they'll be choosing based on what they can see?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some websites actually have little anecdotes from staff who actually work there. Okay. Which I think is quite cute. They have little profiles, and sometimes they have a little quote, like a yearbook quote almost, about why they like to work at there. So I find that quite useful for candidates when you're selling a job to them, to get them to go online and have a look at that website and have a look at what staff members are actually saying.
Yeah.
So that's a useful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, I guess you've mentioned having that strong online presence. So making sure your LinkedIn's looking good for the company, making sure your advisor profile's looking good for your company and your website, and then make sure you're in the social areas, and building some of that customer review and feedback is, we see that as being really important, because we know that's what customers want. We think that's what sort of employees want too. They want to work somewhere that customers love and have a good experience, right? Makes it a bit easier when you're moving in there.
We do see a bit of a divide in the market. Some of the brokers want to work for the regional brokers or some of the smaller markets where you get exposure to a lot of different product lines and a lot of different clients. And some people want your Marsh, Aon. Yes, it's not JL. Yeah, it was JLT and whatnot. But they want the internationals because they want that big brand behind them. But they might get pigeonholed into they only do A to Z PI for accountants. Some people love that. Some people would rather have a whole spread of different product lines that they can work with and a multitude of clients. So it just depends what people are after.
Yeah, that's right. There's options across the board, right? Big companies or the internationals versus the more the ones that have a little bit more opportunity by being a bit broader and in a smaller business, potentially some more exposure. What about in regards to what you're seeing in salaries? And I guess this question comes again from people that are looking to bring talent into their business. How should they be thinking about salaries in the market? We're hearing lots in the economy about inflation. We know wages have been relatively flat for a fairly long period of time, and now there's starting to be a bit of pressure on that. That's what economists are starting to say more broadly. But what are you seeing in regards to the sort of match, I guess, between the employer and the potential employee around salaries? How are you seeing that sort of dance play out at the moment?
That's a really interesting question, actually, Andy. So we are finding that clients who have been recruiting quite a bit recently have noticed that there's been a lot of salary increase just because there's not a lot of people around in the market. We are literally headhunting for each role that we've got. So we're mapping the market out and then headhunting people out of businesses because we have to. That's what we do. We'll headhunt specifically for those roles. The disconnect would probably be between the clients who perhaps haven't recruited recently and they, last time they got an assistant account exec for 55 to 60, that rate's now 70 to 75. Sometimes it'll go up to 80, 85. And it's purely because there's a lack of talent in the market and not a lot of businesses are bringing in completely green grads and training them up from scratch, putting them through their tier 1 and 2. It's just not happening anymore. So there is a bit of a squeeze.
You're not seeing as much of that, people coming in at the base level, the ground level, and sort of building up with the tier 1s, tier 2s, more people looking to bring in that experienced talent, which I guess then adds sort of that instant impact to your business, which is the positive of it, but can come at a bit more of a cost, and maybe that cost is creeping up, as you're saying.
Correct. And I think that, as I said before, it's partially due to the market hardening. So they want somebody who can have those tough conversations. But yeah, just lack of talent across the board, and also it's hard training people up. It takes a lot of time. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, it's certainly true, isn't it? To bring people in, you spend time, you invest in them, you build them up, you give them capabilities, and then they become really talented, and everyone wants them. Sometimes that can be a bit tricky, can't it? So with those sort of expectations and what's going on, we've talked about companies trying to position themselves as an employer of choice, how they can then project that into the market or make that known, and maybe they need to do more and take a few more steps in that regards. We've talked a little bit about salaries and having some seeing and understanding how that's changing and moving, and probably also on that is the desire or the need to make sure you're retaining your talent in your business as well. How do you make sure that the people you've got are happy, which might be some of that flexibility and some of those other things you were talking about could be really useful for people to think about. But going on a bit further, are there any sort of, what would be 3 to 5 maybe top tips that you'd have for someone who's looking to recruit, like right now? What could they be doing right now to recruit top talent? What would be the 3 to 5 things that you'd suggest they start thinking about?
I think on your initial search, use your network. The market is quite small across Melbourne, Sydney, the rest of the country. Use your own networks. Ask around. Ask your staff. They want to know people. A lot of the young guys go to Yips. I don't anymore because I'm a bit too old for that kind of carry on. But you meet a lot of people at those Yips events. They might know somebody who's looking. So use them. And use a recruiter. I think from the get-go, get a recruiter on it because we've got our own networks. We've got a huge database. We can search LinkedIn, back of Seek. We have got access to passive job seekers. We map the whole market before we start headhunting. And we're also able to headhunt where you have restraints. So that you don't have a bit of a broker war. If we're the middleman, it doesn't sort of turn into that.
Okay.
The benefits as well. You've just got to offer benefits that no one else does. And again, going back to that branding, just make sure it's out there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, I think some of those points are really interesting. it's really tricky. It's really competitive. Like it's almost never been harder to find great talent, right? And yet we all need great talent to grow our business. So it is one of those things that you think through. And from being a business owner, I know that tension of do we do it ourselves and save that little bit of money, or do we get a recruiter and maybe that's a really great outcome and we can get there faster and save some time, but it might cost us a little bit. And there's pros and cons to both sides of that. So, I've seen and felt that too. So with how Blake Oliver works with businesses, and you outlined some of that then, I'm just wondering if you can share any of the results that you might have had or any of the client feedback that you've received around that tension. Because as a business owner, you feel both sides of it, right? You do feel that desire often to think, how do you save the money and can we do it ourselves and can we get it done? And then you want to make sure you're bringing really great talent in that can sort of get that thing ticked off your to-do list of finding a new talent. Yeah. So what stories can you share about how people have sort of wrestled with that and how you've helped them?
I guess the bottom line is we're consultants at the end of the day. So if you're having a lot of trouble finding somebody with X, Y, Z skills, how can we fix that problem another way? Can you bring in someone with commercial SME experience and perhaps train them up in that mid-market to corporate space? Or can you take some of their just commercial experience and then train them a bit on PI, D&O, for example? We can advise on salary branding. We can map the market, as I said. We can provide competitor analysis so you can have a look at what your competitors are doing. Some of the feedback that we've had from other clients, we've been working in a partnership with one of the biggest independent insurance brokers in Australia. So over the last 3 years, we've been partnered with them, and we've helped them to completely transform their business from a talent perspective, which has been great. It's been really exciting to see. The branding's been changed, and they've been able to get the right staff for what they're looking for, but also bring in some of that graduate talent and train them up, so sort of help them put progression in place.
Okay, so thinking through both those options, or more than both, but a couple of those different options that they might be able to explore around bringing in talent, how you grow them in your business, and how do you bring in those sort of instant impact players at a higher level, and growing people in different ways. Yeah, I think that sounds really useful. So I think that sounds good. Moving on to sort of the second topic that we're going to talk about is people that are looking to get hired. And here, I guess I'm really wondering if you can help us to get inside the candidate's mind, to think, what are they seeing, what are they thinking, and what are they feeling as they're going through this process? Again, if we want to be the employer of choice and we want people to choose us and have preference for us over the options that they might have, and particularly if you're talented, you've got options, right? And we all know that. And so the question is, if we're trying to do that, how do we get into understanding what's going through their mind and what they're really thinking about? So what are you seeing in regards to clients or through talent at the moment in regards to their expectations that they have as they're facing this? What expectations are they bringing to the table?
Candidates have got a lot of choice at the moment, so they're bringing expectations around, right, if I've got 3 offers on the table, what's going to set you apart? Yeah, there's a lot of choice, but also on the other hand, it's quite nerve-wracking. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. Starting another job, it's nerve-wracking starting any job, even when you can go into the office. But starting another job and you don't have your buddy with you, you don't know who your colleagues are, you've never met your colleagues, and you probably won't be meeting them for another 2 or 3 months. Who knows?
Who knows?
All right. Yeah. So, they're nervous. They're nervous about moving. They're nervous about starting a new job, and with starting any job, you sort of got to prove yourself all over again, because quite often these guys don't know you.
Yeah, and I can imagine with that sense of being nervous, and particularly if you're thinking about bringing talent maybe out of one organisation into another, that's another hurdle that the new organisation needs to think about and be aware of, right? They need to think, how do they reduce the risk or that perception of risk and that feeling of nervousness and anxiety that a potential candidate might have. Because people, naturally become risk averse when there's more complexity going on in the world, and I think we're seeing that. So, yeah, it's an interesting one to be aware of. Often in business, you can be tempted to think, it's not that risky. Come on, let's go, jump in, let's join this thing. But the candidate might be thinking really differently than that, and we need to maybe slow down and be aware of that and help to take them on that journey.
I think that goes back to listening as well, listening to what the candidate wants, what they're saying, where their fears lie, and how we can sort of alleviate some of those fears. And the interview process should be a two-way street as well. It's gone are the days where the client's like, right, you need me. Tell me why I should give you this job. It's more of a two-way conversation. Does this job suit my career aspirations? Does this candidate suit my team? Are they going to be a cultural fit? Are they going to be able to do the job to a high standard? It's really a two-way thing now, more than ever.
Yeah. Okay. So a bit more even playing field there potentially for the candidates who, maybe there's a bit of pressure on both sides of the table, which could be a nice feeling for candidates to have a bit more balance there.
Yeah.
So in regards to the candidates and what they're looking for, are there any areas or roles that you're seeing that they're like, that's what I really want, or areas that they were looking to push into more so than others? And I guess that probably the flip side of that is, which ones are the really hard to fill places at the moment? Because maybe people are just less interested in those or have more opportunity, and so they're gravitating to other areas. What are you seeing in regards to the desired roles that people are choosing or looking for?
That's a really good question, actually. We're finding that personal lines, people want to move out of personal lines into commercial. That's sort of the next step. So anyone with that personal lines experience wants to take that next step. Even if you've got an SME type role, if you could take on someone with personal lines, they're usually itching to get out and start something new and sort of grow and develop their career, as anyone would. We're also finding sort of commercial and also for lines, a lot of them would like to go into a speciality, so they're asking questions around what's out there. Cyber is a huge one. It's pretty new and it's exciting, and it's really the talk on everyone's lips at the moment. So that's a big one that we're noticing candidates are looking for.
Okay, tell us more about that push into cyber. What are candidates saying? What are they asking, or what are they thinking there? Are they coming from positions of experience, or are they yet to have experience and they think it's where the boom or like a growth area is, or what are they feeling about that?
What we're seeing is a lot of the candidates have come from financial lines. They've dabbled in a little bit of cyber because it's quite often featured in the news, and you hear about people getting, there's a lot of companies that have had a few incidents. So because of that publicity, I think because of the growth, it seems like a very attractive option because it's always changing and it's new and it's exciting. It just wasn't really around, 5 or so years ago, and now it's talk on everyone's lips. It's attractive.
Yeah. And so I guess even then, if that's something that candidates are interested in, even brokerages, as they think about growth areas, lots of brokerages are pushing into that area, of course, the general or the broader ones and the specialist ones. We're seeing through Advisr more people specialize on cyber or moving into that category. And so the amount of activity that we see there is ramping up, probably more so than some other categories, actually. So we see that too and can sense that. But maybe there's an opportunity for businesses as they think about their growth strategies to think about bringing specific specialist talent in to help in those areas too, if that's what candidates are looking for. So in regards to sort of skill set, which is always the tricky question, right? Do you hire for experience or do you hire for skills and aptitude and approach? What skills are you seeing that potential employees should be focusing on? So that person who's looking for a job, what skills should they be trying to highlight or bring to the table? And I guess the question is twofold then for the employers as they're looking for candidates. How do they get that alignment between those, expectations again on skills?
You can't really give financial advice unless you've got your tier one, so you're going to have that, or at least have an offering. Somebody who's come from perhaps a Suncorp contact centre or an AMI contact centre, and those guys are great to bring on, pop them through their tier two, and then the tier one, and they can give financial advice. So that's a good way to sort of bring them up. If you can sort of ask, if you meet a candidate and you like them from the get-go, that you think they'll be a great cultural fit, but perhaps there's a few gaps in their experience, certainly bring them on and find out what drives them, and then sort of meet that niche. If you feel like they're going to be a good fit, they've got the right attitude, bring them on and get somebody to buddy up with them and teach them in the skill gaps that they have.
Yeah, fill in those gaps with some sort of onboarding upskilling from the people in your team. Yeah, that's really good advice. So, but in regards to those skills, are there any softer skills that we're seeing come into the industry as being more important than maybe have been in the past? So we've got sort of tier one and some of those structural pieces that are ticket to play. You need this if you want to give financial advice. But what about beyond that? Are there any of the softer skills that people are starting to upweight in regards to the talent they're looking for, and that talent, I guess, and people looking for roles are starting to focus more on as well?
I think this has always been a bit of a big one anyway, but I think the ability to work in a team now more than ever is quite important, because the dynamics have shifted so much. You can't just swing back and say, hey, Bob, what do you think about this risk? There is none of that.
Yeah.
You've got to work collaboratively, but in a completely different manner. So the meetings, even though they are a bit painful at times, you've got to be able to express yourself clearly and succinctly, and sort of get your point across and be able to meld with your team faster, I think, than ever, so that you're not wasting your day playing phone tag with each other, because you're not in the office anymore. I think that ability to just say what you mean what you say, and communicate succinctly is really important at the moment while we're in lockdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Teamwork. It's we've got so many tools that we can use, right? But it still comes down to people being good at using them and good at engaging and asking the right questions in ways that are useful for others, so that they can build that teamwork and build that environment. Are you seeing as well then, in regards to that, I guess, candidates' expectations of sort of the tools or the capabilities or the platforms that businesses are using to enable that? Are there any sort of minimum levels that businesses, most people have moved there over the last 12 to 18 months. We've been forced to in lots of ways. But are there any tools that people are like, this company just appears backwards because they're not this way, or this one's a little bit more progressive because they're this way? Are there any things that are just standard things businesses should be thinking about?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there's not a huge amount of platforms that brokers do use. So you either know the system or you don't. I mean, if you're moving through the Steadfast network, you use Winbeat, Sunrise, or Insight, and you either know it or you don't, pretty much. All the big brokers use their own in-house systems. So I guess that's one easy thing. If you're moving from a Steadfast to a Steadfast, you generally already know that system, so it's a reasonably easy move. But the systems are all much of a muchness. They pretty much all do the same thing. They've all got their own headaches, but they're also a lot easier than using an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's right. So I guess that's for the broking side. Is there anything on the collaboration or the team engagement, or how the business sort of operates and enabling that connectivity to happen? So we've got lots of digital tools that we can use these days. Are there any things there that people are looking for?
Everyone sort of seems to be using MS Teams. That's probably the best tool we're using now. Apart from that, I know we started doing quiz nights and what have you to keep our teams sort of engaged with each other, because you can't have Friday night drinks anymore, so you've got to do something that's a bit of fun. So those little perks, we actually did a race day for some of our clients where we sent them out a box of cheese, and we all put the races on and had a couple of glasses of champagne, and we put some bets on. Those type of outside the box collaborative things seem to really work. It's just something a bit different. And something to attract candidates, I guess. It's and to get your teams to work together and get to know each other a bit better, especially since if you're bringing on new staff, there's no Friday night drinks, as I said, and that's a lot of the time where people gel and relax.
Yeah, that's right. How do you build trust, and how do you build that feeling of teamwork and that team togetherness when we're separate? That's tricky. And so some of those ideas I think are really useful. Particularly, it almost goes full circle back to how does the business position itself, and sharing some of those cultural things. If you're doing some of that, then sharing it's really the easy bit, right? Take a photo and say, here's our Friday night, or we just did this, or it was great to partner with these clients, or share this experience together. What are you trying? Things like that.
Yeah.
I think as a potential candidate, you'd see that and go, oh, that looks more fun than not having those options. But it might take a little bit of new work or new thinking for hiring managers in that business, even as a way you think we're trying to recruit people, but we actually need to think about our business culture and how we position that.
And that's where social media comes into play as well. Get your Instagram going, just pop it onto LinkedIn or get an Instagram and pop that type of stuff on there so people can see it.
Yeah, absolutely. What's that?
Use your hashtags.
Look at you go. You're all over it. This is great to see. It's fantastic. So what about in regards to candidates as they're preparing for this? They've got lots of options. Sometimes when you have lots of options, that means you can be a little bit more relaxed maybe than you need to be or could be or should be. What tips would you have for candidates? How do they prepare really well? And I guess if we're looking to hire people, we want to know that they're prepared well, right? We want to see that activity taken or see that interest. How can candidates be preparing well for their interviews? And thinking here about research and those sort of things, and having a strong digital presence and other things like that.
From personal experience, this is how I prep my candidates. So 9 times out of 10, especially if HR is involved in any way, shape or form, there will usually be a few behavioural questions. So give me an example of when you've had to deal with a difficult colleague. Give me an example of when you had to deal with a difficult client. Give me an example of when you've had to deal with conflicting deadlines. And there's a specific form that you have to follow to answer those types of questions. So it's always take me through the situation, what was the action that you took and what was the outcome. Be specific. So, for example, handling a difficult client. I'm a broker. I had a claim come in, X, Y, Z had happened. I did A, B, C to fix it, and the outcome was X, Y, Z. Use something positive. No one wants to hear about the time that you lost a client because you didn't do your job properly. Just use an example when you fixed a problem, for example, or and try and use bullet points in your head so you don't tend to waffle a bit.
Yeah, okay. Bullet points in your head. That's a really good one. I like that idea.
3 points. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah. And also that flipping it to be a positive story. Even if there's a bit of a journey there, you've got to end up somewhere positive, right?
Yeah.
Because you're right. As the hiring manager, that's what they're looking to hear, is how you solve problems, not create problems.
Absolutely right. And that was going to be to my next point as well. We've noticed a question that's come up recently that's tell me about a time when you've made a mistake, which puts a lot of candidates on the spot because it's, what are you going to admit? What are you going to admit to? You're in an interview, you want to put your best foot forward. But quite often what clients are looking for is, what's the mistake? But more importantly, did you take ownership of that mistake? And what did you put into place to avoid that mistake from happening in the future? Yeah. So there's some tricky questions out there in the market that take a bit of thought. And if you're not prepared, they can trip you up. They're always going to ask you about what do you know about the business as well. So do your research, find out, do they have specialities? How many people in their team? Do they have offices elsewhere? How long have they been around? Who heads up the business? Jump on LinkedIn. You might find that your mate works there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. 5 or 10 minutes of research, which isn't very much, would give you enough answers almost to get through some of those questions. But if you haven't done it, you're just caught wanting. And the interviewer asking that question, they're keen to get a little bit of positive feedback about the place they've worked because they've already made the choice to work there, right? So they're looking for the candidate to be like, well, of course it's a great place in this regards. You're thinking about this, and this.
And that's a good question for candidates to ask as well. At the end of the interview, clients often ask, have you got any questions? Please have questions. And a good one is, why do you like working here? Gives them an opportunity to talk about themselves, but also gives you that insight as a candidate to find out what is good about that company. How long have they been there? Why?
Yeah, and why do they stay, right? What keeps you here? Why do you keep turning up each day? And why are you looking to bring me into this business?
Exactly.
Things like that. Yeah, that's a really good question. Why are you here? Can you tell me, just as we start to get towards the end of our time together today, just as we're thinking about candidates and their personal brand, I reflect, a year or so ago, we ran a session with Yips where we had, I think it was 100 or 150 people turned up, under 35, thinking about personal brand, which for me was sort of mind-blowing to think that many people are interested in it, but also yet to sort of take some solid steps in that regards. What are you seeing about candidates and building a personal brand, and how can they do that well online? What sort of activities should they be doing and thinking about?
I think make sure that your LinkedIn is clear about what you do for a job. If you're a client exec or an assistant account exec, there's a lot of different names out of the market that make it a bit foggy around where you sit in the hierarchy. And also pop on your LinkedIn very clearly what product lines you work in, and even if you fancy it, pop on what you want to be doing. What do you really like about your job? Say if you're a financial lines expert, for example, I do PI, I do D&O, I do cyber, email, etc., etc. But I've got a particular interest in D&O. It makes everyone's life easier if we're trying to headhunt you. If you want to get your brand out there, we know exactly what you're doing and what you're after. So
it's a bit of a signal, right?
It is.
That they can put out there that makes other people aware of what they're interested in and what they're thinking through and where they might want to go with their career.
Yeah. Also on that note, which just getting back to interviewing, if you do have an interview, even though we're in lockdown, it's really tempting to wear track pants and a hoodie. You got to wear a suit. Even though we're online, you got to wear one.
The track pants and hoodies, that's a no-go?
It's a no-go. No, we've had experience with that in the past, and clients weren't impressed.
Yeah, first impressions matter, right?
Yeah, it's still a big thing online. Even though you're not face to face, you've got to dress like you want the job. It's just that level of I guess respect that you've put that effort in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, it's been really good for us to talk today. We talked through a couple of different areas. One, for those hiring managers, how do they help to set up their organisations to be an employer of choice? How do they think through and understand, their salary expectations and requirements there, or how do they position their business to recruit? You've shared with us about how the talent market's changed and that equilibrium of power or control in regards to this has shifted a little bit towards the candidate. They're driving a lot of this at the moment, it seems. And so we need to be more competitive and more appealing as we're looking to bring in talent into our businesses. And also how candidates are thinking through how they accelerate their careers and where they go and how they position themselves well. As we sort of finish up, can you share more with us just about Blake Oliver? And I guess, how do you make a really good partner for insurance brokers? Like, why should they choose Blake Oliver over some of those other options, go it themselves, or potentially some other people in the market? What's special about Blake Oliver?
I guess our USP, our unique selling point, we've got a lot of people who've come from the industry. So their networks, they've been brokers before, they've been underwriters before. So they understand what you're looking for, and they've got that network that's out there. They've been in there working day to day. They've been doing renewals, been under the pump around June 30. So that's I guess one of our unique selling points. We've got a good team across Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, so we are able to service across the country.
Okay.
And we partner with our clients by really getting your brand out there. We talk in depth about what your culture's like, why our candidates should pick yourselves over somebody else. With all this competition out there, it's good to have us as a selling point for your brand. We tend to usually we come out and see you, but a lot of our clients, existing clients, we've been working with them for some of my clients 10, 11, 12 years. So we know the brand, we know what the culture's like, we know what it's like to work there, we know what you're looking for, and it just makes your life easier. In the long run, it's going to save you a lot of time and potentially down the track a lot of money, so that you don't make those mistakes by getting the wrong people in.
Yeah. Particularly some of those longer term partnerships, right? Like if they could start working with you and start building those relationships over the longer term, that becomes incredibly valuable to both sides, because you understand. And I imagine as a candidate, you can ask a recruiter or someone that's in between, you can ask them slightly different questions that you might feel comfortable asking the people at the company. So maybe that's a helpful buffer in there too for people to think about. And both sides, you can get a little bit of feedback there. So it could be a helpful thing for people to think through. So how can people best get in touch with you or connect with you if they'd like to follow up after our time together today?
I can be found on LinkedIn. My name is Julia Cook, COOKE. Otherwise, my email is julia@blakeoliver.com.au. And I think my details are on the Advisr website as well, I'm pretty sure. So you can get in touch with me that way as well. But I'm open to answering any questions. If anyone's got anything for me, I'm more than happy for you to get in touch and have a chat.
Yeah, fantastic. We also have the chat open today. I should have mentioned that earlier as we were going through, but the chat's open. If anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask, we've got a few minutes now, just as we're starting to get towards the end. But if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, now would be a good time to do that as we finish up. As we're doing that, just to give you a brief overview of Advisr and how things are going with Advisr. We're on track for 100,000 people to go to Advisr this year, which is nice, really solid growth that we're seeing. We see more and more brokers coming on board and posting lots of content, building lots of customer reviews. We see that one thing that's really interesting is actually when brokers get customer reviews and share them publicly, then that attracts a whole heap of customers into that broker. So we see that customers are actually looking for that transparency, that independent voice to know what it's like to work with you. So if you haven't started on that journey, have a look around Advisr, see some of the people with reviews. You'll see them with the stars under their name, and you can read those reviews. And imagine what it would feel like if someone was leaving reviews about you publicly like that. It'd be great, huh? It'd be great for new prospective customers to see too. So we see lots of that happening all the time and building. If your brokerage isn't represented yet and you'd like some help or you won't have any questions, always feel free to reach out to the team from Advisr, and we can help you solve any of the challenges that you might have in regards to any of those areas on the platform. So again, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, feel free to ask those. Otherwise, I think we've got a lot of listeners, not a lot of talkers today. That's okay. It's been great to have so many people here today to think about how to recruit and attract great talent in what is a tricky market and a tricky environment. Julia, it's been fantastic to have you with us. Thanks for sharing your deep expertise and subject matter knowledge and insights. It's interesting for all of us to think about how do we position our businesses to be an employer of choice, and how do candidates think about their decisions and how they present themselves as they go through this tricky stage of finding new roles and opening up new opportunities. But it's been great to spend some time together today. Julia, do you have any final thoughts for us just as we look to wrap up?
So thanks for listening, I guess. I look forward to speaking to you all, and let me know if I can help you out, whether you need staff or you're looking for a job yourself. I just wanted to add as well, when we do partner up with brokers, we don't headhunt out of that business. So although we are headhunters, once we've partnered up with you, we do not double dip, as you call it.
Yep, that's always good to know. It's always always a question can be in the back of the mind. It's helpful to know. All right, well, we might leave it there for today, but thank you so much, Julia. Again, if anyone wants to get in touch with Julia, feel free to reach out to her directly. You can see that Blake Oliver's our strategic partner on the Advisor Jobs part of the Advisor site, which is a great place if you want to start by placing those jobs or looking for candidates. You can do that there as well. And if that gets tricky, then Julia is here to help. So lots of opportunities there. But thanks everyone for joining today into this webinar. It's been great to spend some time together thinking about how we can find and attract great talent and bring them into our businesses. Thanks a lot and have a great day.
Thank you.